Hey, just a quick question for you. I think this is something that you and I would disagree on. I don't necessarily see kind of the more pop science origin of the world as being conflicting with the creation story within the Bible. If you understand the Bible to be using more symbolic language and not necessarily like a literal 6 rotations around the sun, I know that this is something that people will hit you up on to try and, make you say something that, pop science people will have soy face reactions to. But it's the year of love. I'm not trying to trip you up or anything, but where's the line in the creation story in Genesis? Is it something to be taken so literally? I mean, it's not really going to make or break my faith or anything, but why is so much weight put into the years or the calendar timeline? Like, what are the stakes to the conversation? Like, am I missing something?
So the 7-day, the week cycle that we have, where do you think that comes from?
I mean, ultimately, it was made up by somebody. I know there's been several calendar reforms. It's kind of just a human interpretation of movements based on crops, based on tradition, based on long way of saying.
So you think the 7-day week is based on crops?
I mean, calendars were used by different cultures to notate different things.
Yeah, well, in the ancient world, when the Hebrews talked about a 7-day calendar, what's it based on?
I don't know.
What's the Sabbath?
The 7th day of rest.
Okay,
so
and where does that come from?
Yeah, the scriptures.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying is, like, if the 7-day week that we have is a 7 days, why wouldn't we think that what's mentioned in Genesis is intended to be 7 days?
Because it doesn't seem to be lining up with what is being found out. I mean, I guess
by who? So what do you mean found out? Like, so there's a paper out today that the universe isn't real. Was that the science man that you're following?
No,
you're laughing, but that's literally what Forbes said.
No, and I get your point. People worship science, but it's a process, not a knowledge claim.
Oh, really? Okay. How do you know it's a process?
It's hypothesis.
Is that not a knowledge claim? Wait a minute. Is that not a knowledge claim?
No, it's suggesting, in my understanding
of
it.
Whoa, wait a minute. So you made a big mistake. You don't see that?
I mean, I'm not. I don't.
Science is a process. That's not a knowledge claim. Hello?
I mean, I'm taking the air out of the validity of using science, quote unquote, as a foundation for much of anything. Which I suppose is kind of, contradicting. I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, again, I think it's a question of where we put priorities and what we think is certain and what we think is less certain. So for me, and this is probably where I'm out of a step with most people in the modern world, I don't put the science world very high on my category of authorities because I watched it for many years and I've been in academia and I see how driven it is by fads, how many false papers there are, how much peer review research is bullshit. So I'm not saying it all is, but a large portion of it is. So I don't put much stock in that, and I'm a skeptic when it comes to most of those things. So whenever I hear people positing these kinds of positions, I'm always open to hearing it. I went through college and grad school endlessly hearing all the Darwinian dogmas, and I was debating my professors publicly on this topic back in my sophomore year. I debated my philosophy of science professor at Philosophy Club publicly on the question of the epistemic basis for the scientific method when I was a sophomore. So I'm not bragging, but I'm saying, like, I've thought about this a lot, and I'm not saying there's not some smart science man that could come in and give me a good basis for epistemology. But what I've already heard from what you're positing is a fundamental contradiction in the claims. So to me, I don't understand why I would even listen to the rest of what you're saying in terms of argumentation. I don't mean it against you personally, But in terms of the argumentation, you said that you're not making knowledge claims, and then you said, but before that you said science progresses. I forget how you worded it. That's a knowledge claim. So it's like, do you know anything about epistemology at all?
Yeah, the basics. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be. I did study philosophy. I was an economics guy, so it's a different school than what I was putting time and energy into. In fairness, so I'll happily admit that I've got a lot more to learn on it. However, I guess the question kind of boils down to whenever it comes to Scripture and whenever it comes to divine revelation, at what is the delineation for a literal interpretation, for an exacting, rather than something that can be interpreted more loosely, or perhaps, isn't revealed in such a black and white 1 and 0 way?
Well, first of all, I never said that it's a black and white fundamentalist interpretation of the book of Genesis. I didn't say anything about anything like that. I just simply pointed out problem in the epistemology, but the strictures would be the mind of the church over time. So, for example, the Sixth Ecumenical Council points out that you can't say that there's death before the fall. And you're positing a position that would require aeons, millions of years of death before we even get the existence of Adam and Eve. In fact, aeons of death is what produces Adam and Eve. To me, that seems preposterous just on the basis of Romans 8, because Romans 8 makes it clear that Adam's fall is what introduced all forms of death, whether physical, spiritual, whatever. So, I mean, you're free to disagree with Christianity, but if we're going to be honest about Romans 8 and the Sixth Ecumenical Council, then it doesn't make sense for a Christian to hold to theistic evolution, all this stuff. I mean, there's many that do, and I understand we're all kind of brought up in this idea, and it's the air that we breathe, but I approach it as a skeptic, and from a philosophical perspective, I don't understand what the argument is that's supposed to convince me of this, and I've been hearing it since I was 18 in college. Feel free to present some new argument that addresses my philosophical concerns with the system, because most people who argue in this way, I'm not talking about you specifically, but that take the approach that you do, they take empirical scientific data as a kind of a given and the most certain type of knowledge. Now, maybe you don't, but most people operate that way. And they never do good in debates because they've never thought about the philosophy of these things. They don't think about what does the scientific method assume for it to be possible. And that's what philosophy does, is that it gets us to ask these more fundamental questions about our assumptions. And so when I start doing that, that's usually where people duck out, because people in the science realm, people in the domain of scientism, they're just not taught any of this. They don't know anything about these things, unless they happen to take a philosophy of science class, which is very few of them.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think a lot of people are trying to appeal to a system that at a really fundamental level directly contradicts the system that's being taught at the university, at the, academic, in that kind of
But I would argue that those people contradict themselves too. So I don't understand.
No, I agree.
I mean, the academic establishment now says that men are women and can be women.
Yeah. Well, that's why, I started off by saying that science, quote unquote, is better understood as a process. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, anytime a white paper is published, they say, oh my God, like capital T truth in my hand, black and white, here it is. But that's clearly not the case, because give it 6 months and some other white paper will totally, fundamentally change the world, man. But
sure.
I don't want to take up your whole night. I really appreciate your time, man. A lot to think
well,
about.
I could even agree to you that, yeah, in a mundane sense, science is, theorization. It's theory. It's progressing in a very strict niche way. And that's precisely why science and scientific discoveries, by their very nature, cannot tell you grand narratives. So right. How is if I'm studying this rock, without the assumptions of aeons of time, it's not going to get me to the gigantic metaphysical leap of aeons of time to produce the rock.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people are, they can't get down to that root level of cause. There's still unanswered questions, and they'll have a panic attack when you're like, okay, how did this thing that cannot have a beginning, how did it come to be? And if science can't prove it, there's no answer. And that just, you'll see them squirm. You'll hear them just get really uncomfortable. But
well, why
anyway,
should I mean, if I begin with the position of the scientific method, how do I know the scientific method? Can the scientific method tell me the scientific method is true? No, I'm being serious.
No, it's not. It's not. No, it's true. It's not self-justifying. All you can do is say, "Well, it is." It just works. There's
works to do what? What does that mean?
Yeah, you tell me. But I think that it's good for recording observations, and it's good. It has a purpose. I'm not going to say throw out observation and questioning totally out the window. It has its place, but it can't find. It can't. I don't know. It's got limits.
Sure, yeah, it's a tool for understanding the natural world, and it does really well for engineering and inventing things and figuring out patterns. But it's not going to tell you what the monkey was telling the snake 11 million years ago in the tree.